Okay, so this is the second video for week 11, and in this video, we're going to introduce a software called Cytoscape. So Cytoscape is free software, and we're going to talk about how you download and install Cytoscape in this video. And this software is a great tool for visualizing your network. It does more than just let you see the network, but it lets you assign values to the edges or assign values to the vertices, and these are often called attributes. And then it incorporates these values into the visualization of the network, so you can see the different values as a picture. So let me give you an example. In this example, we are looking at a protein molecule where each of these Ds represent a domain or a subgraph of the graph for the protein. So you can think of a protein, as we've said, as a network of interacting amino acids. And so each of the Ds are subnetworks or subgraphs. And these subgraphs are based on functional properties. So we have, as we did with the nested graphs, you can think of each of the Ds as a vertex that contains a nested graph. If you look at D4, it appears to have a central role in the network. Notice that the edges between D4 and D1 and D4 and D5 are bigger than the edge, say, between D1 and D3, or between, well, let's pick a smaller one, D1 and D18. So the heavier edge, the broader edge, represents that there's more interaction. How that interaction is defined usually is proximity in the three-dimensional structure of the protein. So the collection of amino acids in D1 highly interact with the collection of amino acids in D4. We've also assigned attributes to the domains. Say, in this case, it appears that there are two different kinds of attributes. Perhaps it's hydrophobicity average or something like that. So we have the yellow versus the blue. And so we can see that D1, D4, and D5 have the same attribute, node attribute, and that they're connected. D4 is highly connected to D1 and D5, just at a glance. So we have this information already. We already know perhaps that D1 and D4 highly interact, but we would have to examine the data. Whereas if we put the data into the network and then view it with Cytoscape, then we can easily see what is going on with the interaction of the domains without having to go back through the data. Now, what we're interested in this particular application is how do these interactions change if we have a mutation. Mutation, we might delete an amino acid or a collection of amino acids, or we might switch one amino acid for another amino acid, which would change the ways that these domains interact. And we want to see, visualize what happens. So what we're going to do is take a single amino acid in D4 and delete it. Now, sometimes when you do that, nothing really happens. And that is, we have to, when we say we delete it, we have to start over with the protein molecule. We have to delete it. We have to either see if the resulting protein is in the protein data bank, or if the mutated form is not in the protein data bank, we would have to submit it to a prediction server, a 3D prediction server. But so we did all of that. So we took this particular protein, we deleted an amino acid that occurs in D4, and then we submit the corresponding network back or put it back into Cytoscape. And this is what we got after we deleted the amino acid in D4. Notice that that particular amino acid caused substantial change in the network of interacting amino acids. D4 is now much smaller than it was before. In addition, it has changed adjacencies. It is no longer not only connected to D1, before it was highly connected to D1, and now it's not connected to D1 at all. So the stability of this protein molecule was changed significantly, and it is no longer the same structure with that single amino acid deletion. That's what happens frequently in studying mutations. You can find that you can make a number of mutations, and the corresponding molecule does not change that much. But then you may find a particular amino acid that is critical, and the deletion of that amino acid causes significant change. And that's often what happens in a disease, that everybody has different mutations in their DNA, but some are so critical that a small mutation can cause devastating effects. So back to Cytoscape, we've seen how useful, just a quick illustration of what it can do. It can do so much more. If you're a beginner like we are, you can learn how to use it fairly quickly. But if you have been using Cytoscape for a long time, you still can continue to work with Cytoscape because there are more and more advanced levels available. Cytoscape's been around for about 10, 12 years at least. And so you can imagine that the number of people who have contributed to its development over the years, that it can be a fairly advanced piece of software. In fact, there's a fairly new piece of software called Neo4j, and Neo4j is a way to represent high-dimensional big data in a graph format. So you can query big data using a query language for this graph representation of your data, and it's very powerful. And so it didn't take long for people to lament and say, we wish we had the power of Neo4j and Cytoscape so that we can move Cytoscape into the arena of big data. So as soon as that came out, guess what there is? That's right, there is a plugin now called Bio4j. And so it's a Neo4j plugin for Cytoscape. So there is so much out there that you can use in the arena of computational biology. And so we're just going to have an introduction here to Cytoscape. So how do we get started? Well, first, if you do not have Cytoscape on your computer, on your laptop, then we're going to go through some of the basics of what you need to have Cytoscape on your laptop or the computer that you use. If you already have Cytoscape, then you do not need to necessarily view the rest of this video, because what we're going to do is talk about how you can get set up with Cytoscape. You can simply Google Cytoscape and the page for downloading will come up. I've given it here on the third button, but if you ever lose it, it's not an issue. As soon as you Google Cytoscape, it'll come up. When you go to the download Cytoscape, the first thing it'll do is tell you you need to have Java installed on your computer. So if you don't have Java, the latest version or the necessary version for the current version of Cytoscape, then it will test and tell you if you need to update your Java version. And if you need to update Java, it will also give you a link where to go to install the correct version of Java. You, of course, will need to know your operating systems if you're using Windows 64, or if you're using a Mac, or if, with another operating system such as Linux. So it'll give you, that information, tell you where to click based on what kind of operating system you have, and it will download automatically. It should say, download and install and say Java has been successfully installed. If you're like me, frequently what it should do doesn't seem to happen. So if it doesn't automatically install, then you can start looking. If you download it, look in your downloads, find the execute file, click on that execute file, and then it will install. Finally, if you're having any trouble with either the Java or the Cytoscape, be sure to use the class discussion. We have people from both business, biology, computer science, math, different people in the class. So the biologists would be helpful with the biology, and the computing people can be helpful with the computing. So it's good to use the discussion board and work more like a team when we're working with the software and also with the biological concepts. So back to Cytoscape. Let's say that we've downloaded and installed the most recent and required version of Java. Then again, now we'll want to download Cytoscape. And it has a really nice setup wizard. So basically, once you download and click execute or install, it'll just go. You just keep clicking next until it's successfully installed. Once it's installed, you'll have a welcome page, and it will give you a place where you can launch Cytoscape on the welcome page. So that's the point where you want to be. You want to be able to launch Cytoscape on the welcome page and have it successfully open up. It won't do it successfully if the correct version of Java is not there. So that's all for this lesson. Well, I want to get to this point for everybody in the class. In the next tutorial, we should all have the correct version of Java and Cytoscape on our computer. So in the next tutorial, we'll talk about the getting started with Cytoscape.